Alone on a beast of a boat. An extraordinary race around the world. Splash time is revealed for the America's Cup. Plus a double helping of Dock Talk. But first, in episode 26 we ran a piece on the extraordinary foiling superyacht Reckmann. Over 300,000 of you took a look, so I guess many of you will know what I'm talking about. Built in secret by Baltic in Finland, she's 111 foot long and designed for fast cruising. By looks alone, she's clearly a weapon and has certainly stirred up some debate, especially when it came to the use of those foils. Towards the back end of the Baltic season last year, she went out on sea trials, and this is what she looked like. According to her builders, over the course of 10 consecutive days of testing, Reckmann hits sustained speeds in the high 20s. Unlike the America's Cup boats that lift completely out of the water, Reckmann uses her beamy chined hull and the leeward foil to generate additional righting moment. The transom remains immersed and is fitted with trim tabs, which can be used to alter the fore and aft trim. The result is a very powerful lightweight boat, and one that will eat up the miles. Clearly it's still early days, but hitting the high 20s so quickly is an impressive performance for such a radical superyacht.
Retouche du vent, 48 dernières heures assez désagréable et dur pour les nerfs.
Une voie d'eau, c'est hyper dur, mais bon, déjà depuis 24 heures je vois que c'est à peu près maîtrisable.
Là on est au milieu du Pacifique Sud, dans le crâne d'une dépression là, depuis 3 jours et bah, c'est rythmé.
Mais même si je la gagnais pas, j'aurais passé le Cap Horn en tête, ça c'est important, je pense que ça restera gravé dans mes mémoires, dans plein de mémoires d'ailleurs. Donc ça c'est magique.
As many of you already know, the beginning of the year saw the start of an incredible single-handed race around the world, the Arkea Ultim Challenge Brest. 6 skippers set off aboard their 100-foot-long trimarans on the 24,000-mile race. We ran a feature before the start about our Leclerc aboard Banque Populaire. So when it comes to getting a view on what's been going on in this extraordinary race, who better a person to tell us than Dee Caffari, who knows a thing or two about solo trips around the world. Dee, it's been an extraordinary race, hasn't it? I mean, I guess you've been following it pretty closely.
I have, right from day one, because I think this race was really everyone going, is it really possible? Can these massive beasts be manhandled solo all the way around the world? And the interesting thing for me was this rule that allowed them to have a pit stop, because what it's actually done is allowed them to keep racing. I mean, as we speak now, out of the 6 that started, we've got 5 still on the race course. Unfortunately, Les Arctiques had to retire. They went into Cape Town, really bad dagger board damage in the foil casing there. I mean, the damage videos are incredible. So he's retired from Cape Town, the boat's on a ship coming back. But Banque Populaire with Armel Leclerc, they stopped in Recife to do their pit stop and repair, allowed him to go into the Southern Ocean with confidence.
Il m'a arrêté à Recife avec ce bateau pour 2 raisons techniques. La première, c'est d'abord il y a eu un problème sur le Genneker. En fait, la voile s'est décrochée de l'avant et en fait, elle est venue arracher le balcon avant. Et puis malheureusement hier, on a eu un deuxième souci d'hydraulique. Là pour le coup, c'est le foil ici, là, tribord qui est complètement remonté. que je ne pouvais plus remettre en position basse. Voilà, il y a une fuite hydraulique, on ne sait pas encore d'où ça vient. C'est un contre-la-montre qui commence avec toute l'équipe qui est mobilisée, chacun sait ce qu'il a à faire. On va essayer de réparer rapidement tous ces petits problèmes. Et puis on va reprendre la mer demain matin et lever du soleil et repartir vers le sud.
Anthony Marchand and Eric Heron also stopped in Cape Town. They fixed their stuff so that they were confident for the Southern Ocean. And then we've recently had a stop from Sadibo. Thomas Cavill stopped in Hobart, did his repair, and the race is still on. Charles Cordrelli has had an amazing race on Gitana that is just not, he's managed it all, they've not stopped at all, and he rounded Cape Horn, literally squeezing between two really big weather systems. Phenomenal achievement, but actually there's a race within the race. So Armel Leclerc and Thomas Cavill on Sadibo are actually challenging each other as they go towards Cape Horn, and the others are still on the race course, so which proves that the pit stops worked.
Well, that's good to hear, isn't it? Because so often we hear these things where they just, well, we knew they're pretty fragile boats, and there was a risk that they wouldn't get round. I want to just, before we go on to where we are at the moment, let's go back to the start and the first few days at sea. What was that like when they came off the start? It was a fairly benign start, wasn't it?
It was a benign start, but don't forget, these guys didn't pick their weather window. So actually the race started them, and we were actually starting the transatlantic race at a similar time. And the weather systems in the Atlantic were all mixed up. There were no trade winds established. There was a big low depression coming across that everyone was fearful because of the sea state. And these guys all set off from Brest, heading down the Atlantic, having to face all these challenges that were coming their way. So actually that first start of the race was really complex weather-wise, so they couldn't relax, they couldn't get into a rhythm, and it was a bit, I think, difficult conditions. The fact that nobody stopped until just before the Southern Ocean, when they do all their checks and think this isn't a good idea, you know, but there was a big gaps created at the beginning, and I think that was as a realisation of that weather system. If you didn't get in the same weather as somebody else, then you fell behind, and I think that's what we saw happen.
And Charles got out in front right from the start, didn't he, Charles Cordrelier?
He did. Well, they were literally having a match race with Tom Lepech on Les Arctiques, and they were side by side the whole way. And it was almost like the other race then was Armel Leclerc with Bank Pop and Sadibo travelling together, kind of toing and froing with each other. But I thought we were on for a match race all the way around the world. And the thing is, we've seen that with the Vendée Globe, where when the two boats are together side by side, they literally push themselves harder and harder and harder, and it helps the other person push themselves harder. But these boats being so fragile, was that going to be a safe option? So I think everyone was glued from the beginning of, oh my God, can this last? Can they literally endure this kind of intensity?
And they didn't, sadly.
No, sadly, yeah.
Because that had been a battle for him to get to the start, hadn't it? He'd only just made it to the start. He'd had massive repairs just before.
Literally a week before was the first time the boat had gone back in the water from the repairs. So he'd literally gone back in the water, just tested everything worked, delivered it up to the start. I mean, that's not the way you normally want to start a race, with confidence in your boat. But fair play to the team around him. The boat was performing really well. He was just unfortunate, and I think it was hitting an unidentified object that I think was the ultimate cause of the demise.
Hello. Voilà, sur l'arrière de mon grand trimaran SR Lazartigue. Notre dérive, c'est la grande pièce qui est au milieu de la coque centrale, qui est normalement verticale, et là, en tapant quelque chose par l'avant, elle s'est inclinée et du coup reculée et déchiré une partie de la coque centrale. Donc on a de l'eau, une voie d'eau. C'est hyper dur, mais bon, déjà depuis 24 heures, je vois que c'est à peu près maîtrisable, et que pour aller au Cap, ça devrait, je suis confiant pour y être d'ici 2-3 jours.
So once the fleet was into the Southern Ocean, it hasn't been straightforward at all, isn't it? Because if you look at the tracks, some of the tracks go a long way north, and they're not as straight line as you might think. Why is that?
Well, and I think the really interesting track was with Banque Populaire, who actually went through Bass Strait, so above Tasmania and below Australia, and then to the north of New Zealand. Now, we hardly ever see that, but it is literally about picking the weather that works for these boats. And I think they pick the weather they want to be sailing in. They don't want to get hit by the big sea state, because that violence is too much for these boats. So they're picking the wind conditions, and they've been sat on the front of depressions at 30 to 40 knots of wind, and they've been doing 30 knots. I mean, they've been averaging between 750 and 800 miles a day average. And I think we've seen some 825 mile days, which has really helped them kind of cover the distance.
Voilà, c'est l'ambiance, là c'est vraiment le sud avec des grains. Une mer de 4 mètres, ça va. Ça passe relativement bien.
And I think it's only now Adagio with Eric that's really struggling with a light wind patch that's made him kind of fall behind a little bit. So he's looking for that next depression to get him going. But I think, now, I think Anthony Marchand is looking at picking up a weather system in the Pacific, and he'll ride it all the way to Cape Horn.
Et regardez-moi tout ça. Ça sent bon. Allez, bon app. Alors après avoir poursuivi une dep, ben ça y est, ça s'éclaircit devant. Une belle lumière, on fait route à l'est. Et on est poursuivi par le front chaud. Voilà.
It's described to me that actually the foils are part of the reason they can do this now, because the foils allow the boats to go quick in all directions rather than just in a particular downwind sort of sector. Do you think that from looking at their tracks and looking at the way they've been trying to work the weather systems, do you think the rules or the theory is being rewritten with these new boats? Are we seeing a new style, a new way of going around the world?
I think it's definitely a different thought process. Even the way they communicate what their plan is. Before it used to be sit on the front of the system and try and stay in the same place. Now they're thinking, I want this size wave, so I just want to position myself just a little bit over here because that's better for my appendages and how my boat performs. And they're not looking at being overtaken by the systems. They're just positioning themselves for the bits they want, which is quite interesting. But I think, this whole pit stop was frowned on by some at the beginning of really, is that a round the world race? Is that really how we're going to do it? But actually it's allowed everybody to still keep racing and the race to be alive.
And you say Charles Quadrelier hasn't stopped, certainly as we speak now, he hasn't stopped, and let's hope he can do a non-stop lap. But interestingly, when he went round Cape Horn, he then slowed right down. He almost had his own self-imposed, it wasn't a pit stop, but it looked like he'd almost stopped. I mean, what was that all about?
Well, it was interesting. As he approached Cape Horn, he actually slowed down a little bit there because he was literally between two systems and he wanted to time it so that he'd round Cape Horn between the systems. He didn't want to be on a lee shore with a big system on him because the ice gate's so far north. So the actual channel they've got to work in between the land mass and the ice gate is quite small. It doesn't give them many options. So if you've got too much wind there, they've got nowhere to go. There's a lot of ice, and they actually saw ice further north than the ice gate. And so they had a media person down there. Jan Rieu was down there to take some footage of him rounding Cape Horn. But actually the race direction asked him to go out and just check the ice ahead because the ice had been seen further north. And he was going through Le Maire Straits and they wanted to check that the ice was clear for him. And they're now going to impose that on all the other boats that are coming up to Cape Horn now, so there's the same level of safety for the boats.
Voilà, vous avez dû remarquer, les vitesses depuis hier sont lentes. Alors je sais pas, elle a une triste mine parce que c'est un choix météo, c'est pas une histoire de casse, c'est pas un problème d'avarie, le bateau est en parfaite santé. Et justement, je veux passer le Cap Horn en bonne santé. Et devant moi, il y avait une mastodonte, une énorme dépression qui me fermait la route du Cap Horn. Ça pouvait passer, c'était très étroit comme couloir avec beaucoup de risques. Et puis derrière le Cap Horn, surtout une météo vraiment pas bonne. Donc avec nos routeurs, on a pris la décision d'être patient, on a une belle avance. Toujours un peu à l'arrêt, on espère repartir bientôt là dans la nuit. Voilà, je commence à m'ennuyer un peu, je crois que j'ai tout réparé, tout vérifié. Et là, je tourne un peu en rond et je suis un peu impatient de repartir. C'était une expérience sympa, mais il ne faut pas que ça dure trop longtemps. Voilà, l'ambiance à bord, 6 mètres de vague. Ça rend jamais en caméra. Mais... Et voilà. Dernier empannage avant le Cap Horn, c'est passé. Voilà. Et là, ça a réaccéléré. Doucement, je ne suis pas pressé. L'objectif c'est de passer le Cap Horn demain. Voilà, il n'y a pas d'intérêt à aller beaucoup plus vite. Toujours un peu le stress là, et après ça va être plus facile, même s'il y a un peu de vent peut-être à la remontée. Il présente beaucoup de choses. Mais il est historique parce que, pour moi d'ailleurs, premier truc en solo. Et puis historique pour ce bateau, historique pour cette équipe, historique pour la voile, parce que c'est le premier bateau volant à passer le Cap Horn. Pour moi c'est fortement magique aussi, puisque en solitaire, quelle émotion de passer le Cap Horn. Ça m'était jamais arrivé, j'en ai rêvé depuis que je suis gamin et ça m'est jamais arrivé. On m'a donné une opportunité, je ne l'ai pas ratée et j'en suis fier. Fier pour moi, fier pour l'équipe. Et voilà, maintenant c'est un point de passage, mais c'est vrai que la course est encore longue. Mais même si je ne la gagnais pas, j'aurais passé le Cap Horn en tête, ça c'est important, je pense que ça restera gravé dans mes mémoires, dans plein de mémoires d'ailleurs. Donc ça c'est magique.
So how narrow is that gate then? That sounds...
Yeah, well, when you're on a big boat, averaging 35 knots, the space gets taken up really quickly. I'm starting to learn this now in my experience with multi-hulls, but yeah, everything happens a lot quicker and you cover distance really fast.
And he slowed down again when he came round to Cape Horn, didn't he?
That's
Charles
right,
Pedrelli
yeah.
did.
So he's just literally slowed down, and it again, you think, oh, is something wrong? Is this going to be, his pit stop? And everybody started looking, but actually you only need to look at the weather model. He had quite a violent sea state, and it was still 6 to 8 metre waves. And there was a big system ahead of him, and he just wanted to let the worst of the wind go through before he then could carry on. And Armel Leclerc did the similar thing after he led the north of New Zealand. He actually slowed down and he did his own checks just off Australia before he got to New Zealand, just in the lee of the land there, just to check everything was okay, and then he was off again. So he kind of hurtled in at 35 knots, spent an hour or two at 3 knots, 4 knots just to check stuff, and then off he went again at 35 knots.
So, as I say, as we are now, they're not too far away from finishing, or at least Charles Pedrelli isn't too far away. What do you think the chances are of him setting a new record, or is that out of the question now?
Well, I had a quick look as he rounded Cape Horn, and everyone's starting to think of the estimates of when I get in. But actually the parameters of not picking your weather window and having the imposed ice gates there changes the route a little bit. It changes how you leave and that momentum, that slingshot you get to the south. So I think we're going to be looking at just over 50 days, which isn't going to give him the record. But actually when you have all those restrictions put against you, that's a pretty fast lap.
It is, isn't it? It's incredibly quick. Now, you've obviously been watching it very closely because you're in the early stages of your own campaign. Just remind us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so I'm part of the Famous project, and the ultimate goal for us is a crewed, all-female crew on a Ultim to take on the Jules Verne record, and that's planned for 2025. And at the moment, we're picking the team and getting the experience and the mileage in on a Mod 70. And June this year, we have IDEC back in the water and ready for action for us to jump on. So we've been watching what these guys have been doing quite a lot.
And that's a boat that knows its way around the world pretty well, isn't it?
Well, yes, she currently still holds the record of 40 days and 23 hours, set by Francis Joyon 7 years ago. And I know it's on many of the boats that we've just been talking about. It's on their list to stand by and try and do. And now we've seen them go around the world, but there's no rules to the Jules Verne. There's no imposed ice limit. There's no start day, but there's no pit stops as well.
So what have you taken out of what you've seen so far that you think might help you?
Well, I think what I'm learning when we're sailing is that intensity of sailing fast and getting comfortable with that. And actually, it's amazing how quickly you do become comfortable with it. But it's knowing when to slow the boat down and how to manage slowing the boat down. Because if you're not in the right position with the weather system, or you're not in the right sea state, your risk to the boat is much higher. So managing that, it's as important to go fast as it is to slow down and manage and control.
Brilliant. Well, we wish you all the best. You had a great trip across. Actually, I should have asked before we sign off. I should have asked how that trip went on the transatlantic race.
It was good. I mean, it was good to be under pressure lined up with Argo and Zulu. They left us behind, but actually to have 7 days crossing the Atlantic with no moon, and just getting comfortable at sailing at 20 to 30 knots was just mileage you just can't take away. I mean, it was amazing. We all finished with a big smile on our faces. A lot of learning, and definitely taken it to the next level.
What's the fastest you've done an Atlantic crossing before that?
It definitely wasn't faster than 7 days, that's for sure. And you know, boat speeds in excess of 30 knots, it's just not normal. So now it's becoming my comfortable normal place, so I'm getting better.
Have you been surprised by that, about how quickly you adapted to it?
Scarily surprised, to the point where you only have to be 1 or 2 knots slower and you're already hunting for more speed. And you're like, when you sit down first at the helm, and it's the middle of the night, it's pitch black and you're hurtling along, the focus is there, the concentration's there, and then you get actually really comfortable doing that kind of pace. And now I understand how they talk about it in Sail GP and on the America's Cup, that 50 knots is intense, but actually how quickly they get comfortable with it and how they can have those normal sounding conversations at that speed. I'm now experiencing that kind of journey of how to get comfortable at that speed.
You're going to get addicted for the need for speed, aren't you? I can see it already.
Oh, I'm loving it. I'm really genuinely loving it.
Yeah, good stuff. Well, great to see you again, Dee. We'll have another little catch up with you later on.
Cool.
From cableless code zeros to structured luff technology and plenty more, Doyle Sails are proud of the developments they've made in the sailmaking world. Now they say it's time for another. They call it hybrid and say it's a new ultra-lightweight product. But having announced it, they're coy when it comes to revealing any more details, other than they believe it'll be the next generation in lightweight sails. They also say that the tests are going well and that it'll be launched in the Grand Prix market first and then into the superyacht and performance racing scene. What they are keen to reveal is that they've hired Brad Marsh, the former technical director at Sail GP, as their chief technical officer, and that he's been closely involved with hybrid. Given his track record on and off the water, along with Doyle's appetite for new technology, we're intrigued to know what hybrid is.
There's nothing new in water ballast on race yachts, but there's been plenty of development in the way it can be moved. Diverse Performance Systems have been supplying and developing systems for a wide range of boats, from 45-footers through to maxis like Bellamente. Their hull scoop valves minimise aeration at speed and retract when not in use to keep drag to a minimum. Their high-capacity pumps can shift up to 900 litres of water a minute, and a large bore crossover pipe means that water can be transferred from side to side in 5 to 10 seconds. Under the skin, the system is even smarter, with sensors that know when a tank is empty or full, along with knowing which valves are open or closed. The on-deck controls are simple for the crew to operate when it's all kicking off.
McConaghy Boats have been at the leading edge of raceboat construction for a long time, during which they've seen huge changes, but not even they were expecting what came next. As detailed in the Cup protocol, foiling chase boats powered by hydrogen fuel cells are a must for all the current America's Cup teams. Having instigated the rule, Emirates Team New Zealand led the way with the design and build and launch of Chase Zero, the first hydrogen-powered foiling chase boat, capable of speeds of over 50 knots and a range of 165 nautical miles. Now working in conjunction with Emirates Team New Zealand, McConaghy Boats are building a 13-metre version, powered by 2 Toyota hydrogen fuel cells. The VIP foiler has been designed to be built in 2 configurations, one with an enclosed cabin, the other with a cabriolet roof and wraparound screen with a bimini. And it doesn't stop there. A 12-seater version has been drawn that could be used privately or as a commercial high-speed ferry. It might not be splash time just yet, but we now know when 3 of the 6 contenders for the America's Cup will launch their AC-75s, the boats that will be used for the Challengers Selection Series and ultimately the America's Cup itself. Under the rules, teams need to give 2 months' notice as to when they're going to launch their new boats. There's been a fair bit of speculation as to what the tactics might be, especially for the defenders. Given that many consider the Kiwis as the favourites, waiting to see what the challengers have produced before revealing their own machine might be an advantage. On the other hand, you could argue that the key design details for the AC75s were made months ago, and that delaying the launch simply reduces the amount of time on the water available to test and train. But now we know. The Kiwis are keen to get afloat and be launched in their 75 in April. Alinghi Red Bull Racing are doing the same, as are Luna Rossa Prada Pirelli. As we recorded this, the other three, Ineos Britannia, American Magic and Orient Express Racing Team, had yet to announce when they were going to launch theirs. Having said that, on the day that the Kiwi announced theirs, Ben Ainslie confirmed that their AC75 was about to leave the builders in Southampton and head to Barcelona. In the case of the French, their AC75 design package came from the Kiwis, so you could argue that out of all of the challengers, theirs will benefit from the Kiwi expertise and have fewer unknowns. But at the end of the day, hours on the water is frequently what counts. The other recent news is the announcement of the full America's Cup schedule, which has now been published. The racing kicks off with the third of the America's Cup preliminary events on the 22nd of August. This will be the first official racing for the new AC75s. The Challenger Selection Series starts with the Louis Vuitton Round Robin on the 29th of August. And once that's done, the America's Cup itself starts on the 12th of October. So, as you ink in some of those dates in your diary, you'll see that with the addition of the Youth and Women's America's Cup, along with a J-Class event, it's going to be a busy old time in Barcelona from mid-August to the end of October. One other bit of gossip that's been doing the rounds is what we can expect to see when the boats are launched. Typically, extreme boats don't win the America's Cup. Yes, I know Australia 2 had a radical wing keel, but that wasn't the sole reason for the historic win. Generally, designers need to strike a balance between innovative design and an all-round performance that can cope with a variety of conditions. This is especially true for the challengers, who have to be competitive across a longer period and therefore a wider set of weather conditions. But this time around, there are some who are saying that given how far ahead the Kiwis have been on the technical front, a middle-of-the-road boat simply won't cut it. To win the Cup, you're going to need to get radical. Which starts to make sense of the chatter coming from Luna Rossa that suggests that we should prepare to see something radical. In the meantime, you may also want to check out an interview we did with Kiwi boss Grant Dalton when we were in Jeddah, just before the team heading back to New Zealand for their summer. Plus, we sat down with Ben Ainslie and Hannah Mills at the launch of their Athena Pathway programme. Both will be posted on our America's Cup playlist.
Since 2021, clothing manufacturers SLAM have been on a mission. Led by 470 and star world champion Enrico Chieffi, the Italian company has taken some bold steps. One of the first was to focus on working with some of the best teams in the leading edge of the sport. Here, the America's Cup is an obvious arena that Chieffi knows well from previous Cup campaigns. Today, the SLAM partnership is with Cup defenders Emirates Team New Zealand. Operating at high speeds means that designing kit for those on the water is now on another level. Tight-fitting clothing is important in high apparent wind speeds to reduce drag, while being comfortable and easy to move in. Short races and hot temperatures were additional considerations, as was designing for the cyclors. Clearly not all of this kit will be suitable for the rest of us, but it's an impressive and demanding environment that will no doubt deliver advantages down the line for the broader sailing world.
Not all asymmetric sails are equal. Of course they're not. But as UK Sails explain, there are some key points to help get the basics right. The straight line measurement between the maximum hoist position and the tack to the sheet, and the sheet back to the top are the fundamentals. Every percentage point of difference between the mid-girth and the foot and luff lengths changes performance and ratings. The luff length helps determine the projection of the sail, another crucial factor when considering what's required for either windward leeward courses or offshore reaching. Then there's the fullness in the luff. A1s, 3s and 5s will be designed flatter. A2s and 4s will have deeper, more rounded sections. And these are just the starting points. Be it displacement boats, planing machines, inshore or offshore, understanding your boat and what modes you're aiming to be quick in is fundamental to success.
Sail furling is in Reckmann's DNA. Their latest launch is a new design within the CZ range of Code Zero furlers with an angled drive. Designed to be mounted either on the bow or inside a bowsprit, the electric and hydraulic versions are both available with working loads from 4 to 16 tonnes. With no exterior moving parts under the deck, they can be fitted more snugly into the bow. A new train plate attachment for their underdeck head sail furling gears is also available. This means that the load is taken by the bow structure rather than the deck, so no reinforcing is required. Reckmann's in-boom mainsail furling systems have been evolving too, with drives that are at the front of the boom to reduce the loads at the gooseneck in the event of a crash jibe. The configuration also keeps the power supply as short as possible and makes servicing easier too.
As always, thanks so much for watching. Make sure you subscribe to us on YouTube, it's free, and tick the notification bell so that you know when we've posted new content. We're also on Facebook, Instagram, and of course our website. Stay safe, stay well, until next time.